so happy to see you today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So Trina, we've known each other for maybe just over a year now, and I I'm just amazed about the work you do actually. So you're a board certified behavioral analyst and you work with children with behavioral issues such as children with ADHD, autism, and things like that. So for those of listening to the podcast or the YouTube channel, do you want to tell us just a little bit more about maybe your own story and what got you into studying behaviors in children? Did that came from your own personal experience as a parent, or?
Yeah, actually it did. And I don't think my kids will mind that I tell you a little bit of my story. My kids
Yeah.
are grown now with their own kids.
Mhm.
Um, but I think the passion was just realizing that, I went through as a parent, I really struggled with what to do, how to do it, and how to do it right for a child who struggled with things like self-regulation and all of that. And so I felt like there's got to be somebody out there that can help me.
Mhm.
And through my research with my own children, I realized there isn't someone who just focuses on that, not knowing at the time, what behavior analysis was, or it was very new back in the 90s, not something that we typically saw back then. I was a special education teacher for many years. And, I was that teacher that the principals always brought the bad kids to. They didn't know what else to do with them. So they brought them to me. And it was really through personal experience and then through being a special education teacher that it made me realize there's more to this. To the behavior side of children. And it's not just their bad kids. A lot of them didn't have the skill set. They didn't know what they didn't know. And the same with the parents. So
Mhm.
it's really from that. It just kind of happened organically, to be honest. It wasn't something that I set out to do. I didn't just wake up one day and say, I want to be in the world of behavior, because had I known then what I know now, I'm not sure I would have chosen that path, just
Okay.
because it's hard,
Yeah.
especially when you're doing in-person care, and you can get some pretty aggressive behaviors. But yeah, it kind of happened organically for me. And I began to realize, just the need was so overwhelming for parents and children and even adults. And there's no diagnosis, that it's just for this or just for that. We know through research that ABA, which is applied behavior analysis, is the very best therapy for children with autism and adults with autism. Um, but it's not limited to that. We know
Okay.
now through our research, through my own practice of, years being in this role, that it is good for adults as well as children. It can be good for anyone just wanting to make a change, and the
Hmm.
behavior modification piece. But it goes to, I work with parents with children with ADHD, autism, sensory processing disorder,
Yeah.
all kinds of, oppositional defiant disorder. And a lot of times, to be honest, some of these kids have no diagnosis. And it's really just the parents trying to figure out, what do we do? And so, yeah,
Yeah.
so that was
Hmm.
a really long explanation, but that's where I am.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm sure like I can sort of hear in the parents' heads right now. I'm sure a lot of them are actually wondering. So do you actually, first of all, do you actually work with children or with the parents or with both of them? And does those behavior actually do come from our own type of parenting, maybe your children?
I do work with both.
Okay.
Depending on the age of the child, the developmental levels of the child. sometimes they're not open, or I have children who are nonverbal, so it's kind of
Yeah.
limited on certain things we can do.
Mhm.
The majority of what I do is I work with the parents,
Okay.
and I basically teach them, educate them, and coach them just as if they were one of my employees. So if I were training and educating an employee, a registered behavior technician, we call here in the States, I teach them the foundational knowledge of behavior analysis, and then strategies, why we do what we do. So that's really what I do with the parents, but I individualize it so that it's specific for their child. And we start with an assessment to really look at what are those underlying causes. We
Mhm.
know now that behavior is really a form of communication of an unmet need, or a skill deficit somewhere.
That's a
So if
very
we're
good point. Yeah.
uh,
Hmm.
so when we find that, and we really dig for that, and we find those underlying causes, it's only then that we're able to really go in and develop strategies and a treatment plan, really, for that specific child and their family and their circumstances. And I have never written the same plan twice, because it's just for it to work, it has to be individualized. And which is one of the reasons I kind of pulled out of traditional therapy, working in a clinic, doing in-home care, working in the schools, is because a lot of times working for companies, ABA companies, they're mandated in certain things. Insurance companies hold back, and they really require certain things, and the children don't get the therapy they really need, because of insurance, or
Mm.
because of certain things. So that was one of the reasons that I went into private practice, because I felt like, I could do more if I had more time to individualize and give that type of attention and care, and putting my expertise into parents, starting there. That's where we saw the biggest change. And so that's really what drives me to continue to do what I do, is just seeing and hearing that change.
Yeah, definitely. So from what I hear, he has to be a personalized um, protocol for it to work. So it can be like something super broad that we apply. As an example, for a ADHD child, we will do this, and for autism, or even like a sensory processing disorder, we will do that. There is no like one size fits all recipe. It's all individualized, and this is what will actually ensure that this work for you and your child, right?
Absolutely. Because,
Mm-hmm.
what I've found over the years is parents will say, well, I read this book and I did this program and I did this and I tried that. And, there's a lot. We could spend years researching, using Google to research, or reading books, or, but knowing how to put some of those things in practice, that's where the coaching comes in.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, if parents don't know the functions of their child's behavior, or the purpose of the behavior, that what is it they're trying to convey, sometimes they can make matters worse. Sometimes they can make behaviors worse, because they're going about it in a certain way that maybe they read about. Oh, I took
Mm-hmm.
this course, so I'm going to try this. But it's not what their child needs, and so they don't, they're surprised when it doesn't work. But it depends on the child, it depends on their needs, and a lot of things are variables in that, the child's atmosphere, their home, are their parents together, divorced, or, lots of things go into, it's a very layered process. And having me there, to develop that individualized program and then coach them through it, I really feel and know that is why we have and see the success that we do.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And going back to something you just said previously about like I know that at least for myself, and I know many parents have been experiencing that. Sometimes as parents, we have the feeling that sometimes our children are doing bad things to sort of trigger us, or to get like in a dynamic of like provoking us or some things like that, right? And personally, I know that in my parenting career, if I can say, the day I realized that either a good or a bad behavior from my children, they both have a little bit like the same end result in terms of like your child will do whatever it takes to catch your attention. It could be in a positive way or in a negative way. And I did realize that as a parent, that changed everything, because then I would see my children with a different lens, right? So I was not getting triggered as much, and I could apply like better strategies to actually help them to either like self-regulate or get out of this negative pattern that they might have been getting into. So this is what you've actually mentioned. So whenever a child is having a bad behavior, I don't really like to call it a bad behavior, but this is like, in fact, they're just like sort of raising their hands, I need help, right?
Right, absolutely. And just like you said, when we look at it differently, when we as parents look at it as, okay, now they're telling me they need something. What is it that they need? Or what message are they trying to convey? When we look at it that way, instead of, oh, they're just doing it to upset me, or they're doing that, and we take it personal, like it's a personal thing against us, the parent, those are two different lenses that have completely different results, right? So if we can look at it as really a teaching moment, a teaching opportunity, because, just like when we're helping our children, our 9-month, 10-month, 11, 12-month-old learn to walk, we're not scolding them or putting them in timeout or using discipline methods because they fall. We're helping them and we're teaching them we're guiding them. We need to do the same thing when we see our children having these bad behaviors. And I put little quotation marks, because, it's really just them in their developmental level. And sometimes it doesn't matter their age. Sometimes, you could have a 10-year-old that really is having some issues, more like a 2-year-old, and it's really that unmet need somewhere. So when we have that lens of, okay, how can I teach them a better way? Then it's not personal anymore. And then it's not a trigger. It's a moment for us to stop and be mindful and be present and think, what do they need? As their parent, what do I need to help them with? So a completely different mindset and a completely different result,
Yeah, definitely. And something very important too is our child won't necessarily be saying, I need this at this very specific moment. Sometimes they don't even know what they actually need, just like us adults. Sometimes we feel not so good. We're not quite sure what we will need to help us feel better. So our children are also experiencing the same type of challenges in their life, right? So we gotta try to dig in a little bit and try to help them find what they need to get out of this pattern or this bad behavior again, right? So absolutely. Is there like, I'm curious to know, is there like specific, like what are the behaviors that the parents do struggle the most with when they come and see you in private practice with their children? Is that anger? Is that tantrums?
Wow. Honestly, they're all over the board. As I mentioned before, it can, I have children who are undiagnosed. And then I have children who have autism or ADHD, children who have multiple diagnoses. So to say which one is the most prevalent, probably defiance.
Okay.
The parents will say, he won't listen. He doesn't do any, he's not doing what he's told, or he's not, defiance probably is the biggest. It seems to be consistent across the board. But, it depends. A lot of times when I'm working with a family and they have a child with autism and they're nonverbal, sometimes we see aggression because a lot of times they're frustrated, and we can imagine we're not able to communicate. So we would get frustrated too. So sometimes I'll, have to help them through and teach them how to teach their child different ways to communicate without aggression. So it's really all over the board, but aggression, destructive behaviors, the defiance, and I mean, I could go on and on, but you know.
And like, as an example, I'm sure like all parents listening today, they had moments where they would get into like opposition with their child, where the child won't listen to whatever they ask them or require them to do, right? So, but when it gets sort of like a real challenge for the child and the parent, where every single thing that the parents mention, the child won't do it. So I'm curious to know, is that more something that either the child learned to do, or is that in the parenting strategies that the parents are trying to use with their child, where maybe they, I don't know, I'm just making it up, but like where they may be too directive, like are telling them too much what to do, as opposed to finding ways to engage them into doing something. You know what I mean?
I do. And what's interesting is it's so individualized. To just give you like an answer that fits all, it's not possible.
Okay.
For children who struggle with attention deficit disorder, a lot of times they're so hyper focused, you could say their name 100 times and they're not going to hear you, because they're focused on what they're doing, especially if it's something they love to do. So when a parent's in the other room saying, hey, I need you to go do this, do this, do that, and then they say, I told you 5 times and you didn't do it. Sometimes that child did not hear anything from the other room because they were so hyper focused, on that attention. But then there's other times where they've learned that I don't have to get up and do anything until she starts yelling and coming into the other room. Then I know she's serious, and that's where, consistency and different parenting styles and me teaching those strategies can change everything. I have an example for you if you'd like it.
I would love.
Yeah. So, a parent was really struggling with their son listening, and even both parents really, but more so the mom. So, she told me, she's like, I don't know why he listens to a dad, but he doesn't listen to me. And, his dad can tell him 1 time and he'll go and do it. And I have to tell him like 10, or I have to yell. And, I'm in the other room yelling and it takes us 20 minutes to get out the door, or, so we kind of talked through those scenarios. And the difference was, dad, when he wanted something, would walk into the room and get down on eye level and look him in the eye and say, hey, buddy, I need you to get ready for school. We've got 5 minutes. Let's get out the door on time. Okay. And he had that, and the, mom was multitasking. She's packing lunches, she's in the kitchen. So she's yelling from the other room, you've got 5 minutes. We've got to go. And so 10 minutes pass, he hasn't moved. And now she's yelling, and now they're rushing out the door and they're late. And just that little difference, So I said, for this next week, do it just like dad, just go in there, right down to eye level, and ask him. And I even had her ask him to repeat it. So I said, when you go in the other room, just get down eye level and say, hey, buddy, you've got 5 minutes left, but then I need you to get your backpack, grab your shoes, and let's get out the door on time. Do you understand me? And, have him say yes, and then have him repeat it back. So tell me what mommy needs you to do. And then he would say it back. And she said the very first day, it went just like it should. And every day after, and just a tiny little change in her parenting style changed that morning battle, and I'm not saying that's going to work for everyone. That's where that individualized piece comes in, because it may not, but just that tiny little change changed everything for their mornings and being on time for school and work,
Yeah, definitely. It's so funny. You started telling this story, and I was like, oh, will it be eye contact? Because this is what I was actually thinking about. Because very often as parents, we're so busy doing like multitasking, right? And we very often forget to have real connection with our child. And that comes, of course, through eye contact, or sometimes just get closer to them, or we'll be cooking dinner while we're asking them to clean up the living room, or while yelling at the other child, go get in the shower, or whatever that is. And I think it's very important to remember, just like you mentioned, to have moment of true connection. And that includes when you have to ask your child or require your child to do a specific task.
Yes.
Otherwise, they're not just right there waiting for you to talk to them. They're busy, they're having their own life.
Right.
And they might not be ready to move to do something else because you required them to do so, right? So yeah, and this is also something that I don't know, personally, I know I do have to remind myself that all the time, that I have to give them more room to be able to finish or complete whatever they were doing. And I can't require my own children to be like, okay, let's go right now. They are having their own bubble in their own life, as I am having mine too.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really all comes down to being present, being present in the moment. And I've had parents tell me, I do not have time to go and make eye contact or go in the other room. I'm doing 100 things at once. And what I tried to explain to them is, the 20 minutes that you spend arguing with them to get them to do something is more than the 2 or 3 minutes it takes to walk around the wall and go in the other room and then make that connection. And we know now that, having and being present as a parent in each moment, and then having that connection changes the relationship. When your relationship changes and that mutual respect is there, there's a change. Oftentimes our children, and I hate to say this and say it this way, but our children begin to want to please us more because they feel more connected. So being present and having that mutual respect, but also being consistent and having clear expectations. When our children know what's expected of them, and we've been clear about that, and we've been clear about the consequences, and consequences has such a bad tone to it. It's good or bad, but when they understand what the consequences are, good or bad, then it makes everything just a little bit easier, because then there's no question in the child's mind, what do I need to do and what's going to happen if I do or don't, and because that's already there. And being consistent, it just kind of seals the deal, if you will, because again, then they know there's no anxiety as to, I didn't know what was expected of me, or I didn't know what to do, or and one of the things that I have that I love to tell the parents to do, especially if there's even more than one child in the home, is to sit down as a family and come up together with a few I call them family rules or family expectations, so that everybody in the home holds to things like being respectful, being kind, not yelling, whatever their values are that they want in their home, and then even posting them and having the parents agree. Because a lot of times I think as parents, we think our children just need to listen to us. I tell them something, they just need to listen. But, we're learning that parenting style is not only outdated, but we're learning it doesn't work with every child, and, when we are demanding them to listen and demanding that respect, it it sometimes can work against us. So if we have that family meeting and we all come together and we make those family expectations and rules very clear, then it's much easier to go back to our kids and say, look, remember we made these rules together and we all agreed to follow these. And unfortunately, this is what you didn't follow, and that went against our family rules. And so here are the consequences.
Mhm.
That makes that conversation so different from, I told you 1,000 times and you still didn't do it. That's it. You're grounded, and then we find a lot of times that parents say things and realize they can't follow through, and so then there's inconsistency, and so then we have a whole nother mess. So
yeah, definitely. And I really love this idea that you just gave to have like family rules. This is such a great idea. And would you recommend that every once in a while the family sits down together again, reevaluate the rules, making sure this is super clear for everybody, and maybe even knowing like if we don't respect the rules, here are some of the consequences we could be experiencing as a whole, right? Because a family is like, we're living all together under the same roof. So it's, I really see it as a whole, even though there is like individuals in there, but yeah, so this is such a great idea. And I think it's a great way also for the children to understand really well, like, okay, yeah, that's true. I made that commitment to everybody else. And if I do want other people to respect me, I first need to respect them as well. And this is a lesson, not only in their family, but for the rest of their life, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And two, I think it teaches the children that they have a choice. The parents can say, do this, do this, do that. But when you come together as a family and you create family rules or family expectations and you post them and you all agree, then you can say, you chose not to, or you chose to do this instead of following our family rules and being respectful. So teaching our children that they do have a choice, and every choice has a consequence, whether it's good or bad or sometimes just neutral. But that is a huge just a lesson that we can teach our kids, because as they get older, they have to realize mom and dad aren't going to be there to help them make those choices. So when they learn to choose and choose the right choice at an early age, they tend to make better choices, because they've learned my choices have consequences. And one of the things you mentioned, you asked, would I recommend, revisiting those rules? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have several families that they have a certain night of the week, and they make sure that night they schedule nothing else, and they have dinner together and they go over the week. How was your week? What happened? And then, is there any issues that we need to work on or discuss or change? Are we all okay with what we have decided as a family that we want our home to look like? So absolutely. And it keeps them connected, because that's the key. Yeah.
Definitely. That reminds me, when my children were a little bit younger, we used to do like family meetings every Sunday evening. So we would sit in the living room and we had like a stick that we would pass around each person. So everybody gets to speak what they liked about their week, what they didn't like about it, and something that challenged them inside the family itself. And I found it so helpful. Like, even though we wouldn't necessarily resolve this issue at this specific moment, just to give the children the opportunity to be listened to have their voice, to be able to name it. And also for us as parents, it will just set the tone for the rest of the week, where we'll be more connected also as a whole. And the children really likes to be able to speak up and say what they think, what they feel, and so on. And even more so as they get older, right? So
That's awesome. That is great. I wish more families did do that. And
Yeah. Now the thing again is as you just mentioned, is consistency. So sometimes like when we start doing something like that, we don't necessarily stay consistent. And now I do realize I don't do that anymore with my children as they got older. But that really inspires me to keep on doing that or to start again. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and keeping that line of communication open, because as you know, I'm sure, as they get older and get in their teen years, they tend to want to isolate and kind of clam up. But if that's part of their routine week after week after week. And I found too, a lot of times when there's siblings in the home, those family meetings are great times to have a neutral ground. They pass that stick, or every family tends to have their own thing. But that is their time to say, with no judgment, what might have been a conflict that week. And then the parents know, okay, this is something we need to address. This is something we need to look at to make sure that our children are connecting and getting along too, and not just parent to child. So yes, love it. And I recommend to every family.
Yeah, that's such a great point. So, like, is there like a specific rule that you do encourage families to use in terms of like if they have family rules, is there like, I don't know, 5 rules they should come up with, or 15, or I guess maybe not too many rules. Otherwise, like the family would just like the kids would just be lost. That's like too much. Maybe like a maximum of how many do you think?
I say usually no more than 5.
Okay.
And to make them a little more general, so be respectful. But while you're making that, those family rules together, you don't just say be respectful and write it down, but take the time to talk about what is respect
What
look
is respect?
like.
Yeah.
Then put it in terms of what you want them to do. So instead of writing the family rules out, don't kick, don't hit, don't yell, don't, put it in positive terms. So what is it you want you want them to do? So be respectful, be kind, anything you want them to do. If you're putting it in those positive terms and the behavior you're looking for, that's much easier for them to understand than don't do this, don't do that, because then it just looks like a set of rules, just rather than really a family mission statement or a family agreement.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes we say also when we use negative sentences such as like, don't hit your brother. All the child can hear is actually hit your brother, right? Our brain doesn't really work well when we hear negative sentences. So we will actually tend to focus more on like the actual core of the sentence. So we better phrase it the other way around, where we put it in like, be kind to your brother as an example, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah. And this is even something that can be really interesting too when we talk to our own children or to anybody, in fact, to try to turn our sentences in a more positive way. I think the message will be heard more easily and applied probably more easily. So instead of like, so that's such a good point. Thanks for this great tip. Do you have another idea of a tip that you very often propose to families to help them? How can I say, to help them really try to settle a strong foundation into their family, not necessarily just for kids or just for parents. That could be for both or like one or another, but something like, I really like the family rules you just mentioned. Even the eye connection you also mentioned, this is something really important. I'm thinking something like each day, this is something I actually do propose to my little patients and the family I work with, to make sure that every single day they have a true connection with their child. So at least 5 minutes, or it could be like 30 seconds, 10 times a day, right? But they have to do that every single day, because we can sometimes go by for like almost an entire week realizing I haven't been having a true connection with my child. And now it's like so hard. My child doesn't listen, is not feeling good, always wants to hug me or whatever that is, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Probably the two things that I say the most over and over. The first one would be to pause. When there is something and that you're in the heat of the moment, your child's having a meltdown, you're triggered, you're stressed, it's just craziness, right? Or even if it's not so crazy, but you're both kind of feeling, or everyone's feeling a certain way, it's just to pause. Learn to pause,
Mm.
especially in those times where you feel like you're really kind of in this moment of struggling back and forth, that opposition with your child. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to walk away, and to not just walk away, but to model for your child how to appropriately walk away. So saying things like, buddy, I see that we're both kind of upset here. So I'm going to walk away for a little while. Mommy's going to calm down, and then you can calm down. And then when we're both calm, let's come back together and let's meet right here in the living room again. Let's give each other 5 minutes, okay? And then walking away and just breathing. And I think, even teaching our children all of that, but modeling for them to pause and to
Mm.
breathe, or to just walk away and get away from all of it. So then we can use, this brain here that we have to really then connect and look at the situation, and not just have that physical response. Because a
Yeah.
physical response in that moment would be yelling or stomping or throwing, or, because, our kids aren't the only ones who can throw tantrums, right? Um,
Definitely.
right. So just learning to pause, and that's hard, especially when there has been a behavior pattern set, not just for the child, but for the parent. And especially when it's personal, like we talked about before, when you can step back and pause, that's huge. And it de-escalates things. A lot of times the battle is over, because you did pause. So when you do come back, they're calmer, so they can listen, so their brain does work because they're no longer in that fight or flight moment.
Yeah.
So learning to pause. The other thing would be, it seems like a lot of families, that just neurotypical children, no real issues or anything, but a lot of families struggle with transitions. So having to leave the house and get out on time,
Mm.
having to, go from one place to the other. I find this a lot with children who are in homes where the parents are divorced, or separated, and they have two homes they're going to, going back and forth. A lot of times those transitions are hard. So one of the things that I like to recommend is giving the kids a heads up. So saying to them, okay, in 5 minutes, we're going to go. And I know that you're really into this or into that. So I'm going to set a timer for you. Or even teaching them to have their own little timers. But just kind of giving them, because just like you said earlier, our kids have their own lives. And so for us just to say, let's go right now, and not even giving them that opportunity to kind of, finish what they're doing or put things away, or, if we can be mindful of that,
Yeah.
transitions are so much smoother. So just giving
Mm.
that the heads up, even if it's just a verbal heads up. But I love timers, or I love, especially teaching kids to look at the clock, and just learning different things, to be able to transition appropriately.
Yeah, that's a great way. I love it. Those tips are really good. And like something very interesting that sometimes we see also is like we try to, like, as an example, okay, we gotta go, and we tell our child, okay, we gotta go like right now, as opposed to 5 minutes before, telling them, okay, we're gonna leave in 5, maybe you can start to clean. Sometimes we're like, okay, we gotta go right now.
Right.
But then maybe half an hour earlier, we told our children, like, um, you got to clean after yourself. When you finish something, you got to wrap up. But then we don't give them the opportunity to wrap up, or to put back that book into the wherever it goes and stuff like that. So in their brain, it's like there is a disconnect, right? We require them to do something, but then on the other end, at some point, no, this doesn't apply right now. So for them, it's very confusing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I think like
And
taking or allowing them to have the time to finish what they're doing, to wrap up. It's also
yes.
not as stressful for them as well, as opposed to,
Right.
okay, we gotta go right now.
Yeah.
This can be really stressful, and they will always be in this stressful mode where, they could be doing their own thing, really enjoying it, and all of a sudden it's like super rush. You
Yes.
gotta do this,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So yeah,
And
definitely.
sometimes they can have, kids can have true meltdowns at that moment because in their brain, they cannot walk away
Yeah.
without finishing that task. I mean, it's a true thing. It's
Mm,
not just, oh, they just don't want to stop. They love what they're doing. It's more than that sometimes. I mean, children truly have to have an end, an expected end. And that's what I call it, an expected end.
yeah.
And they feel like it's all undone when there's no ending. And so giving them that 5 minute heads up, then they know, okay, I need to bring this to an end so that it's almost like putting something in a box and shutting the lid. Kids need to do that. And not
Yeah.
all of them are really, triggered by that, but there are some who just feel like they are willing to fight over it to be able to finish what it is that they were doing.
Mm.
And it's really a brain thing.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I like your like the image you just give, that it's like a box that you haven't closed the lid. So like as an example, if the child, you always require them to leave right now, it's like they leave open box everywhere in their
Yes.
brain or in their home, right?
Yes.
So yeah, this is such a good point. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. So as we bring this interview to an end, is there something that you'd like to share with parents, that either through your personal experience or through working with families, that you would say this is definitely like a must, for every single parents of the universe? Could be a tiny thing, but just like a small tip that like, I mean, you gave us already a whole bunch of tips on things we can do with our children, right? But something that really deep down in your heart, that this can really change something for either the way the parents show up with their children or for the relationship they have with their kids.
Mhm. I think probably something that I could say with every family. Uh, I think you said it. What every parent in the universe is to be warm and nurturing and compassionate,
Mm,
because you know we haven't arrived. We are still learning. We are still growing. And when we look at our children through that lens and we see them, and be mindful of the fact that they are learning and they're not at the same developmental level that we want them to be, that we expect them to be. When we can look at it that way and we have that warm, nurturing, compassionate heart for them, and we love our kids,
yeah.
but there are times that we need to step back and remember those things. But if we always have it on our mind to be compassionate and nurturing and warm to them, it can diffuse a lot of things that just don't even get started. But then it also creates that connection. And I truly believe with everything in me that it comes down to connecting. And my thing that I like to say is connect before you correct, because
Yeah.
that is where you will see the most progress. Connect with them first. So
Yeah,
yeah, correct.
connect before you correct. Yeah, that's such a good phrase to remember. I love it. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And if there are families who would like to maybe follow you, see the work you do, where they can find you, Trina?
I have a website and
Mhm.
it's called Dynamic Instruction. And somebody just asked me the other dynamic instruction, but you do this, you do that. And I had to explain to them real quick that it's just the word dynamic is always changing, right?
Mm.
And I'm not a cookie cutter therapist. I'm not a cookie cutter coach. So it's always changing, just like our kids and just like us. So
Yeah.
dynamicinstruction.com is my website. And I am on Facebook, and Dynamic ABA Solutions is my Facebook page there. It's public. And I post content every day, hopefully little tips that help parents. So yeah, I hope that everyone will kind of look into that. And if you feel that you need services, jump on there and look around. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will actually also add the links down below this interview. Thank you so much for being with me today, Trina. Thank you so much for doing what you do also, because there are so many families out there who need this type of support to really get to build a strong relationship with their child and to just really, live in a peaceful home where there's a lot of joy and happiness, not just struggle and fights and things like that. And you just showed us that there are ways or strategies we can look into a little bit more to bring more joy and happiness in our home. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
You take care. Bye-bye.